he starts out by introducing himself, and the quote I wrote down was, "I am part of the generation whose parents and grandparents had everything taken away." Hey everybody, we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Erin.
I am Dr. Kristen.
And you are very welcome to our wee tiny corner of the internet where we're on the third week of our Colonizers World Tour exploration of Indigenous peoples for the month of October 2022. And this week we are looking at the lived experiences and culture and perspectives and history of Alaska Native peoples. And for today's piece of art, we have found, as we are finding with these Indigenous people groups that we've studied this month, it's very difficult to find accessible video art produced by members of that group. But we are finding some good ones anyway, that even if they just profile humans who are a part of those groups. So that is what we found. And we found on Prime Video for rent the 2019 documentary And Now We Rise, which is the portrait of Samuel Johns, who is a young Athabascan hip-hop artist. He is the founder of the Forget Me Not Facebook group for displaced people, Native peoples in Alaska, and an activist for what he hopes is a cultural renaissance for Alaska Native peoples, as a means to heal from his own trauma and also from the historical trauma of colonization and forced assimilation and cultural genocide. I think for me, he starts out by introducing himself, and the quote I wrote down was, "I am part of the generation whose parents and grandparents had everything taken away." And I thought that was such an important starting point for his story. He is a recovering addict. He talks a lot about intergenerational trauma and pain. And as a part of his recovery, he started to work with unhoused people in Anchorage, in Alaska, and started out making sandwiches and then volunteering at a day shelter. And then eventually he set up this Forget Me Not Facebook group, which was intended to help people reconnect with their family members who were displaced or missing or had lost contact. And especially as we talked about in our 101 video yesterday, because so many places outside of the kind of the more urban areas between Anchorage and Juneau, at the bottom of Alaska, a lot of the other places, especially places where tribes live, it's very difficult to access. So if you end up leaving for whatever reason, and you are then socioeconomically disadvantaged, unhoused, displaced, it's impossible to get home. There's no way to get home. And so he starts connecting people, but then also helping to fundraise to send them home, which was some of the most beautiful things that I've seen in a video in a long time, was people that hadn't been home for 10 years getting to reconnect with their family. So it is all that story. And then it is as well the story of Samuel and kind of his journey as a untrained social worker, trauma expert, healthcare, mental health provider, all of these things that so many people in the nonprofit sphere just end up doing without qualifications and without training. And we see a lot of the impact that it has on him emotionally. he takes a few months off and goes to Standing Rock, to the Dakota Access Pipeline protest. And so a lot of this story of this documentary is about kind of relearning, or I guess in another video I watched today about Native Hawaiians, like indigenizing practices and kind of relearning or figuring out how to heal together in a communal way. That is very much a part of the cultural practices of Alaska Natives and a lot of Indigenous peoples, but something that was lost. And he actually says that. He said, we had the tools to help us heal together, and we lost that after contact. And the diversion to Standing Rock I thought was beautiful just in the lessons that he took away from it. But it's about 55 minutes. Artistically, it's a good story. It's not like a good visually looking film. But as we said offline, like I never would have watched this without the Colonizers World Tour. So, and I loved him. He was hilarious and lovely, and his hip hop was interesting, and he was a really good storyteller and capable of connecting with young people, which was, I think, really important and made him really effective. So I would recommend it. I think it's worth watching if you're interested in learning more about the contemporary experiences of Alaska Natives. It's not going to be winning any festival awards, but I don't think it was made to do that anyway. Kristen, my love, what would you like to talk about? What would you like to say for this?
Yeah, I think it's laundry folding documentary. Like, you know, when his story really takes you and you want to pay attention, you can, but like it's not, the story is not intricate or detailed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, if you're looking for a way to like learn and be a better person while also paying your taxes or something, like this is a good one to throw on in the background. I found him incredibly endearing. I think every human who's ever met him finds him incredibly endearing, including Mark Ruffalo. Ruffalo makes an appearance. I was taken by everything you said. You know, of course, these folks wouldn't have a way to get home once they have to go to Anchorage, and like that had just never occurred to me. And so I think too, it's a good reminder that like, I mean, I can rant about how evil Mark Zuckerberg is until I turn blue, but Facebook has saved lives. Mm-hmm. It has destroyed lives, but it has also saved lives. And it's not the connecting power of social media. I appreciate that they didn't focus on that. Because I don't want to glorify the Facebook platform, but this guy used it to change lives.
Yeah.
And that's a really beautiful, beautiful thing. I also want to highlight again that even people who are trained social workers, when you deal with this much kind of trauma, you always need to take a break. I was glad that the mayor of Fairbanks was like, we always knew he was going to have trouble. And I will say, I think he's still living in Fairbanks, and I might try to find him next year and buy him coffee. And just say, like, thank you for everything you're doing. The one that got me, the story that got me completely, and I think I'll carry this in my heart for a long time, was the mother who said, I thought the only way I was ever going to see my son again was looking down on him from heaven. And that was it. That was worth the price of admission, as it were. He told some really great stories. I loved him talking to kids. I loved his points about the fact that there aren't words in their language for substance abuse at all, because that's something that contact gave them, not something that they had. And a really good reminder to distinct, like, if we don't have a native language, a native word for it, it's not a native thing. And to kind of remind that of people. Especially as English speakers, where we just create new words all the time, and we don't really think about. I don't think we ever think about that. That if there isn't a word for it, that might mean it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And so we don't have the same relation to language. I've heard Gaelic speakers say the same thing. that there were words the Brits gave them for problems the Brits gave them. And so I think it's a common Indigenous situation. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say besides that. I would recommend it. I would. It's an hour of your life. Like I said, it can be background noise. And it's definitely more worthy than a lot of other things you're going to find on Prime. And on the internet. And it's a great reminder that humans are resilient as hell.
Yeah.
And that community is the way to move forward.
Yeah. And like, you know, time and time again, when we study Indigenous people groups all around the world, right? I just keep thinking to myself, I find myself having these thoughts like every single time. I'm like, I think they always understood, you know, the way to do it was through community and relationships and treating the land with respect so that it provides sustenance for you. And it's, you know, white settler colonialism and capitalism that has imposed all of these systems on people groups that weren't built to live that way. And when you combine that with the trauma of that settler colonialism, you get so many stories like the ones that Samuel Johns was being told, and his story as well. You know, he said earlier on in the documentary as well that to explain kind of high rates of substance abuse, domestic violence, and he said people started numbing themselves because of misery, death, and grief. And it reminds me of what you always say about addiction, is that no one wants to be an addict, but they don't want to be in pain. And that's whether that's physical pain, emotional pain, existential and spiritual pain, intergenerational pain. Every time I think we can be reminded of that is a good thing, and to be reminded of what people can do when they work as a community to try and help folks. And yeah, the one, I wrote down his name, but I'm not sure. I'm going to find it in my notes. The one guy that he took home, and then his mother who said, you know, we didn't have any hope. And then we saw you. Oh, Robert.
Yeah, wasn't that Robert? Was that Robert?
Yeah, Robert's mom and auntie. So we had no hope until we heard about you.
Yep.
And, you know, hope is a beautiful thing and a powerful thing. And it shows you that when a person decides to make a difference, even when a lot of things are stacked against them, that they can. And that we should do what we can to support them and to dismantle those systems that are stacked against them so they continue to help people. But we will put a pause in our coverage of Alaska Natives for this time being. We thank you for joining us as you do, and for contributing with your comments and your thoughts below. Share resources. If you are Alaska Native and you'd like to share with us or correct us for what we might have gotten wrong, please do. And we have one more week left in this month. Next week, we will be back to talk about Kanaka Maoli, or Native Hawaiian people. And that's another fascinating tale of U.S. military intervention and occupation and cultural resiliency in the face of all of that. I've learned more about the two states, the formation of those two states in like 3 days than I ever learned in my 38 years before it. And I understand why we aren't taught the real history, because it doesn't fit into the American Nationalist Project. But I know you and I are both shaking our fists at times during this. So join us next week as we shake our fists at the United States illegal occupation of Hawaii, and come learn with us and shake your fists with us, and we will hopefully see you guys then.
Can't wait, guys. Bye.